Show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. Thank you for joining us this 4th of April, 2016. We really appreciate you listening to our show. And this morning, as you know, on Mondays, I have dedicated the Age of Fission radio show to the issue of St. Louis until at least we get some remediation and some real justice for the people of St. Louis who, frankly, are still victims of World War II. It's still going on. And today I have the great honor of interviewing Mr. C.D. Stelzer, who is an award-winning investigative journalist and an independent journalist from St. Louis. He's a St. Louis documentarian. He has worked, he helped co-direct a movie that is out recently called The First Secret City. So without further ado, let me introduce CD. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
I really appreciate your time. CD generously offered to fill in. I had again attempted to interview Mary Osco, who many of you know has a very severe battle that she's dealing with. She's got cancer, and she was sick, again, too sick to do an interview. So I scrambled over the weekend, and CD generously offered to fill in for us. And I hope that this won't be the first time, because the information he's going to bring to us is extremely valuable. So, CD, first let me ask you, I heard about you through this movie, The First Secret City, but as you were telling me that this was not how this originally went, why don't you give us a little bit of the background of how this came about?
Well, my personal involvement in the issue, started back in 1991 when I was a reporter for the Riverfront Times newspaper here, and at that time, there were the Department of Energy was doing a cleanup of the Weldon Springs site in nearby St. Louis, St. Charles County, Missouri, and that's when I became introduced to this subject. And environmentalist Kay Dry, who has been fighting, for environmental justice for the last 4 decades on this issue, and so I was introduced then, but the story itself dates back to World War II, 1942 exactly, and it involves the Mallinckrodt Chemical Works of St. Louis. They did the processing of the uranium for the Manhattan Project, and for the first atomic bombs, including also the first nuclear chain reaction that took place at the University of Chicago, and also the Trinity test in Los Alamos, and then the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. After that, they they continued refining uranium in the 50s and 60s under contract with the Atomic Energy Commission during the Cold War. So the byproduct, the waste from this uranium processing was scattered throughout the St. Louis metropolitan area. It's 6 sites at the very least. I mean, they're large sites, but then also the haul routes where the trucks ran up and down. It's the byproduct is scattered all over the place and at different levels.
So on those 6 various sites, are they all under control? I know we have, the Westlake landfill. That's one of the sites, right?
Right. Well, there's Westlake is the site that's gained the most attention lately, and for good reason, because there's an underground fire burning, as probably many of your listeners already know.
Right.
And it's heading in the direction of the radioactive waste. And EPA is just within the last month has acknowledged that it's closer than they thought it was to the fire prior to now. And then just last week they acknowledged that the radiation has moved off site. So it's both being dispersed by through the air and also through groundwater and surface water. It's not standing still.
No, and that's the nature of radiation. I mean, it's ridiculous that it's taken them this long to actually acknowledge it's moved off site, especially the number of times you guys have been flooded. That's the outrage about it. So
yeah, the waste at Westlake was dumped there in 1973 by B&K Construction Company. It was a local construction company that was contracted with Cotter Corporation, which is still one of the responsible parties. Their parent company, Exelon, at the site.
Well, look, you have a really great website. It's called The First Secret City, and it really does explain your movie, your trailer. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about this documentary that you put together called The First Secret City? Tell us what that's about.
Sure. It started back in actually in 2009 when I wrote a couple of print stories for an online magazine here, and then I decided to look at it as a film, and it took me more than 5 years to complete this project. I worked 2 years with a partner that we ended up having a disagreement, and so I had to start the project back up with my now partner, co-director Allison Carrick, in I guess 2012, and we came out with the film at the St. Louis International Film Festival in November. And it's been well received here locally. We're screening it all around town, and the next showing is next week.
Well, I wish we could all see it. I've looked at the trailer. That's one of the things I asked Allison is how do we get this out? I see that it's on several in sort of in the film festival circuit, correct?
Right. We probably have it submitted to a couple dozen film festivals. In February we won a documentary award for it at the Big Muddy Film Festival at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. So we're hoping to eventually get a distribution deal and so that it can be seen nationwide.
It'd be great if we could. I know that I'm going to approach our little local, we have a local metro that plays, film festival movies, kind of odd things, and find out what it would take to get it here. Because, this is the issue about nuclear, is that it's all interconnected. Here we are on the West Coast, but up the road from us we have Hanford, which is very similar to what's going on in St. Louis. I think the primary difference between St. Louis and Hanford is that you guys have people living right next door to it. I mean, that's the outrage.
That's the thing about this, and that's where the title of the film comes in. That this was St. Louis was the first secret city in the sense that the city was the location where they first refined the uranium initially for the Manhattan Project, and it's often overlooked. Los Alamos, Hanford,
right,
Oak Ridge, Tennessee are all now known as locations for the building of the atomic bomb, but it all started here, and it was classified work as it was in all those locations. And that's one of the problems with actually getting to the bottom of what occurred here, is because it was secret work, and so it remains somewhat enigmatic as to what occurred and how much uranium was processed. Everything we have the conventional theories or stories or history that we go by, but some of this information, I'm guessing, is still classified.
Well, this is my question. I mean, you guys are living right. To me, I mean, I'm sort of nonplussed. I'll be very frank with you that the citizens of St. Louis are taking this and what I consider to be like, there's no major protests about it. Like, when this thing went down with Ferguson, it was interesting because I found out about what happened what's going on in St. Louis, I would say last November, when it really came to my attention, right? And that I started piecing it together, and when I was reading about what happened with the Moms of Just St. Louis, it seemed to me that the racial tension in Ferguson got going just about the same time there was a lot of press and a lot of indication for for the St. Louis radioactivity disaster that's going on. And yet not one single word came out in the news at all about what was happening with the Just Moms of St. Louis. That was when they were just making some headway, some things had happened. Why you're in the media industry? Why is it that we cannot get the media to actually really take a handle on this and help our country? I mean, our elected officials, I believe, are being misrepresented as to the severity of this situation.
I mean, that's a great question. I really don't know. I could venture some guesses, but one thing that comes to mind is Flint, Michigan, for example, to use a comparison. The lead contamination there is a big problem. Obviously, it needed to be corrected. It got the attention of the national media, and I think one of the reasons for that is you can actually see the color of the water.
Right, exactly.
When it comes out of the tap. With radioactivity, it's invisible, and right. So the nature and the scope of it is not. It can't be seen, and the powers that be, including the regulatory agencies, downplay the problem.
Well, they downplay the problem, but this is that's kind of been their directive. Anybody who's watched this has understood that Dr. John Goffman outlined that many years ago. They underreport the negative effects of radiation by 90% and deny that radiation causes harm. That's their MO, but the question still remains, how is it that the people who are aware, the citizens, I've said this to many interviewees on my radio show when they talk to me. If it was me, I would be organizing sit-ins and protests. Like, I would go park myself on Governor Jay Nixon's office and say, we're not leaving until you declare a state of emergency. I mean, this is a catastrophe, a national catastrophe that's being ignored. Completely agree.
The governor here has been relatively silent on this issue. That's for sure.
Well, he told me he did not see it as a problem.
Oh, did you interview him?
No, I called his office on the air.
Okay.
They weren't very happy with me, but I wanted to get an answer.
I think as far as the citizens go, the residents of the area, part of what works in tandem with the secrecy of the government is a sort of mass denial. People don't want to accept the idea that they're living with radioactive waste.
That's called social engineering, isn't it?
Well, I heard that term used in your introduction, and I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue as to why people are willing to accept this. I mean, this is literally murder. In my view, what they're doing and the EPA is doing, in my view, is murder. I mean, I said this to one of the offices when I called them. I did call all the elected officials one time on the air, but if there was a bomb dropped in St. Louis, we would, within 48 hours, 24 hours, we would have a state of emergency declared. It wouldn't even be a half an hour. But because this is a slow drip, we have just as many people dying in St. Louis as if we'd had a bomb dropped on them. People there are getting sick.
And that's it's appropriate comparison because there are plans for what to do by the federal government for what to do in case of a nuclear disaster. Well, but because it's not seen as being perpetrated by quote unquote terrorists, this is not considered a nuclear disaster. It's like watching this has been going on for more than 70 years. The seminal work on this subject, the making of the atomic bomb by Richard Rhodes, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, doesn't even mention Mallinckrodt chemical in the 800 pages of text.
Right.
And I don't understand why that's one of the things we had to grapple with in making this film. Why St. Louis, which is a major metropolitan city, and particularly in the mid-20th century when all this was going on, it was one of the top cities in the United States, why this has been so overlooked until now.
Well, I think that, you don't want my response, CD. I tend to be a little bit of an emotional person. I think that this is an intentional, like they're destroying the water. If you look at what they've done with nuclear in our country, our water supply, our air supply, we are the world's worst polluters, our government has been. And in order for them to stop what they're doing, they have to accept responsibility.
Well, this is I know you bring up a good point. This is probably the worst place to dump nuclear waste because
yes,
we're in the Mississippi River Valley. It's the main watershed for the entire North American
continent. That's right.
And they've, in the case of Westlake landfill, there's radioactive waste that they know is leaking into the groundwater. And it's not just there. It's at the downtown site, or north of downtown, where they manufactured the uranium to begin with. They dumped it, they being Mallinckrodt, dumped it in the river back in the 40s. It's almost for sure. It's at the airport site. It's at another interim storage site called Lottie Avenue. Those two sites have been cleaned up, and the question, as well as the one downtown that I mentioned, the question is why Westlake has not been cleaned up. Now, there's ongoing work at another site, though, that's spread out throughout North St. Louis County, and that's Coldwater Creek, which is a tributary of the Missouri River. The contamination in Coldwater Creek migrated off-site from at the airport where they had Mallinckrodt ended up dumping this stuff for decades. And then it also, when I moved it to Lottie Avenue, that sat right next to the Coldwater Creek too. So it seems like they like to dump this stuff back then right next to tributaries of and watersheds where it would be obvious that the contamination would migrate and flow downstream.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you wouldn't think that they were that stupid, but and I don't know. Sometimes I question, the reason for why they did what they did. I mean, in the case of Westlake and also Weldon Springs, they dumped the radioactive waste into quarries.
When did when did that happen? What years did that happen? Do you know? Was that in the 70s or in the 60s or in the 50s?
They started dumping at Weldon in the 60s.
See, this is the thing. In the 60s, that's when John Goffman, Arthur Tamplin, and Dr. Linus Pauling, they were all employed by the government, the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and during those periods of times, they were being commissioned to study, to find out if nuclear waste could be helpful, if we could find a useful source for this. They knew during those times that it was extremely harmful because those three men were jumping up and down saying this stuff is harmful.
Right.
So this is the point. My point is, I don't think it's an accident. I always liken back to Henry Kissinger when he said we have to eliminate, 2/3 of the world's population. I really believe that one of their tools has been the nuclear. They knew that it's not an accident. They have known what they're doing. I don't believe it's an accident. I mean, I honestly, when we look at what they've done and the gross negligence, even now, like, I can't believe our elected officials in Missouri, especially in Missouri, are willing to just go to work every day in Congress and ignore the fact that a major metropolitan city, an area in the hundreds of thousands of people are being exposed to massive amounts of radiation. I mean, it makes me really, in Japan they had to pass secrecy laws to keep journalists from asking questions. In the United States, they don't have to pass any secrecy laws because the journalists don't ask questions. They just don't ask the questions.
I think there has been some coverage of this in recent years. It's been covered by Rolling Stone. It's been covered by the Wall Street Journal. But in general, I agree with you. I mean,
it's yesterday. Don't you think, CD, that this idea that this is yesterday's news, for me, that's infuriating. Like, this is not yesterday's news. This is an ongoing, unexplained catastrophe for some reason. And frankly, when you look, one of the things you and I talked about very briefly before we got on the air was the environmental racism. But that's one of the things that shocked me when I was looking into the economic level. A lot of these areas where it was dumped and processed was extremely low-income areas. It wasn't. It wasn't done in the rich neighborhoods.
Exactly. Okay, so whether it's white or black neighborhoods, they chose to dump this in poor economic areas, and it's clear in the site in East St. Louis where I started doing my research on this back in 2009 is a perfect example of this. The community is called Venice, Illinois. It's adjacent to East St. Louis. It's 90+% or more African American, and it's impoverished. Well, for the last they started dumping or processing uranium formaldehyde at this Dow chemical plant there in the late 1950s and early 60s.
What's the name of this city?
It was a white community. Since then the demographics have changed in this poor African American community. So it started back in the early 50s and 60s, and they took the waste and they dumped it back in the back of the factory on a 40-acre lot, and it sat there until the 1990s when they did a quiet private cleanup. But the government that really hasn't, the Foods Wrap program came in 2000 at this former Dow plant and did a partial cleanup on the inside. But it's really, they haven't addressed this issue with the nearby neighborhood, which is within a stone's throw of the plant. And they know that they also process thorium at this plant for aerial defense purposes.
What's the name of the plant?
It's called now it's called Magnesium Electron of North America. It was previously Spectrolite, but it started up in the early 1950s as a Dow chemical plant.
And what city is this in, CD?
This is in Venice, Illinois. It's Madison County, Illinois, which is the second most polluted county in or area of the United States after East LA. So they have that.
After East LA, because I know East LA is one of the most polluted areas in the country.
Right. So basically, one of the things about the east side of St. Louis is back when during the industrial age, St. Louis actually implemented some zoning and safety laws, but the east side was like completely unregulated. So the chemical manufacturers, including Monsanto, could do whatever they chose to over there without any restrictions, and basically just became a dumping ground. And that whole area for 5 miles on the east side of the Mississippi River is a floodplain. So the chemical contamination is leaking into the groundwater in this region. That's an area called the American Bottoms, and it's never has been addressed adequately.
That's right on the Mississippi River.
Yes, it's right next to the largest river.
Our federal elected officials and your state elected officials know that we have chemicals leaking into the Mississippi River and radiation leaking into the Mississippi River, and they're doing nothing about it.
Yeah, well, it's a bi-state area, so it's not just Missouri; it's Illinois as well. And
okay, then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So
that must make your elected officials feel good. It's not just them.
Yeah, it's
wow.
I've been covering this for off and on for more than 20 years. So maybe I'm a bit jaded, but it is when you ask the questions you're asking, it does. You got to wonder why this isn't being handled better than it has been. Why it isn't being addressed as a disaster.
See, I'll just full disclosure here. I think our elected officials, I think the nuclear industry is being run by the deep state, and our elected officials have two options. Do you want to be rich or do you want to be dead? You cannot counter these people. I mean, they are killing people in St. Louis with an absolute cold heart. They have no regard for human life. So any elected official who wants to get in their way probably has an accident. I mean, this is my point of view, CD. I'll be frank with you because I've been looking at this. I'm relatively new to the anti-nuclear fight. I didn't really, between you and me, I believed what the government said about Fukushima for almost a year. For a little bit more than a year. And then I had a nightmare and I woke up and I did my own research. What happened was I had a nightmare and then I started doing my own research and I went, wow, oh my gosh, this is out of control. And one thing led to another. 3-4 years later, here I am. I have my own little radio show and I'm interviewing people in St. Louis, of all godforsaken places. St. Louis, Missouri is the heart of America. And our elected officials are like, children are dying in St. Louis from cancer. we know it's from radiation, but I'm nonplussed at the lack of sense of urgency at this.
The cold, to bring up another organization that's been that's been at the forefront of exposing this. There's a group of women that grew up in North St. Louis County. Some of whom have moved away. But they organized through Facebook, and they did their own health study, and they found an incredible number of various kinds of rare cancers, thousands of cases, and different other illnesses, autoimmune illnesses, and such.
I know. I've had
that are prevalent in clusters up along the Coldwater Creek watershed, and they brought this to the attention of the health authorities, both local, state, and federal. And there has been a response. They are doing an epidemiological study now, but it seems like it's too little, too late.
Yeah, well, it's not even just a little too late. It appears to me it's the same business as usual. We're going to take the slow train to trying to figure this out. In the meantime, I think Congressman Lacey's office told me there are at least 81 families their office has identified that need to be moved right away. And the government is doing, that's my thing, is it's all well and fine. Okay, I'm not interested in the Nuremberg trials. I think we need to just go, okay, we made some really terrible mistakes. We've handled this incorrectly. We've understated how harmful it is. But let's immediately address the safety and health of the people living here, and let's move them out immediately. We have an endless pit for as much money as we want for the war machine and for killing people, but for saving citizens of St. Louis and the people who live there. But as we're going through this interview, again, I think I'm recognizing why there's this. And when you talk about that city, what was the name of the city in Illinois you said is the second most polluted site?
Well, it's in the Madison County, Illinois, and the city is Venice, Illinois.
Venice, yeah. Illinois is the second most polluted city. So this is my point here, is if they accept responsibility for one city, then they have to do it for another, then they have to do it for another, and we might not have the money for the war machine if we start taking care of our people.
Well, the thing about Venice that I might point out is the reason that it's called Venice is because the streets look like canals when it rains. Okay, they built this foundry during World War II, and it was bought by Dow Chemical in the early 50s. And the location of it is basically in the floodplain in an area that used to be a pond that was drained. Okay, so the water table in this location is very shallow. It's the water, the contamination, both chemical and radiological, is seeping into the groundwater. They've known, and you're correct, they've known about this for decades. They've done studies about it. The Department of Energy. I think one of the things you need to everybody's concerned about getting action now, and as they should be. But also, people need to understand the history about how this came up and how it happened. And it started with the Manhattan Engineering District and the secret project to build the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Engineering District was part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And it became, after World War II, they put it in the nuclear program in civilian hands, and it became the Atomic Energy Commission, which then morphed into the Department of Energy. So all of these entities are historically connected in the past and are part of our atomic age chronology, if you will.
CD, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you said the AEC turned into the department, didn't it turn into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the AEC, run by the Department of Energy?
It got split off. Okay, so you have the Department of Energy handles the weapons, and the Nuclear Regulatory Nuclear Regulatory Commission handles nuclear power.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yes, so you have the same agencies with changing their names over time. That's where it gets confusing and kind of complicates things, because you have to sort that all out and piece it together. The Corps of Engineers FUSRAB program, that was initially a Department of Energy program, started back in I believe the late 70s or early 80s. The cleanup of these sites here were turned over in I think in 97 or 98 to the Army Corps of Engineers. But for some reason, they left Westlake out of the list of sites to be cleaned up in St. Louis. And then that was still under the auspices of the Department of Energy. In 1990, the Department of Energy said, we don't want it anymore, and they gave it off to the EPA. So it ended up in the EPA's hands in 1990. They've been sitting on it since then.
Well, wasn't that illegal for them to give it to the EPA in the first place, fundamentally?
Well, nobody understands how or why this exactly occurred. You know, the interesting thing that I just found out recently is that one of the community members asked a question of the EPA a couple of years back, and in a written reply, the EPA spokesperson said that in order for the Corps of Engineers to be given control of the cleanup, which is what many of the activists want here, they'd have to have an act of Congress, which legislation has been introduced, recently, and passed in the Senate, and it's now in the House. But also, the other way of getting this turned over, according to the EPA itself, to the Corps of Engineers, would be if the Department of Energy would agree to it. And what I don't understand is the Department of Energy is still one of the responsible parties under the EPA Superfund. In other words, Republic Services, the trash company that now owns the landfill, and Exelon, which previously owned Cotter Corporation. Those are two responsible parties. The third one is the Department of Energy itself. And yet, according to EPA, one of the responsible parties, the Department of Energy, could say, yeah, we want the Corps of Engineers to take over this cleanup. They haven't done that. And in fact, hardly anybody even mentions the Department of Energy's part in all of this.
So have you been in touch with the Department of Energy and asked them why they are not pushing to have this moved to the Army Corps of Engineers?
No, I haven't.
Okay, maybe that's something that we ought to do, is really, or even contact the president's office, because he oversees literally the president. He answers to the president, right? So
right. And I think the fact that the Moms organization met with the White House, I think it was the entity within the White House, which Dawn and Karen Nickel met with last week, is the name of it escapes me right at the moment, but that's the right route to go at this point, I think. They've kind of did an end run around the EPA, went straight to the White House and the executive branch, and it would be, I think, the timing, because Obama is a lame duck, it would be, he's a big supporter of nuclear energy, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, he is.
But this would be the time for him to step up and do something. I think that his Department of Energy needs to take responsibility.
Well, his Department of Energy is all sort of fell on his lap during his Department of Energy, isn't it? Like, he's the one who had to come out and lie to us and say, oh, don't worry, it's everything in Fukushima, we're all safe. Well, he went away for 3 weeks. He went down south, took his family down south. You know what I mean? Like, this is the outrage. I have to say, like, I'm just a citizen, CD. Like, I'm just a person here doing this. I'm just nonplussed at the lack of urgency by our elected officials. Like, they met. Yeah, I mean, it is not unknown that this isn't like something that's brand new. We know for a fact that nuclear pollution causes all these genetic diseases. When the government says, oh, well, we're going to take our own studies, now that they've been humiliated by the citizens of St. Louis conducting a Facebook survey. Like, do you know what I mean? This is the outrage of how idiocracy, our country's run like an idiocracy. I mean, we're supposed to pretend like it's perfectly fine what the government's doing. It's not perfectly fine. It's murder.
Yeah, they act like they're the voice of reason, and they take the high ground, and they don't know. They have a very paternalistic attitude towards things.
Well, it's murder. Frankly, it's murder. They are watching people die of nuclear pollution that they created, and they are doing nothing about it. I mean, we are spending billions of dollars reconstituting. I mean, we're over in the Middle East, we're bombing them and rebuilding and bombing and rebuilding. All we're doing with St. Louis is just destroying them. We're bombing them and we're giving them no money. I mean,
well, here go ahead.
That's all right.
I mean, here at home, we've also under the Obama administration, they've renewed nuclear energy. They've licensed first nuclear power plant since 3 Mile Island. So
That's right.
The Department of Energy is on board with expanding nuclear power, and they still don't know what to do with any of the waste from nuclear power.
Not only do they not only know what to do with the nuclear waste, it's not like, I mean, Fukushima has thrown us into this show is called The Age of Fission for a reason. Our entire planet has never lived in the age of fission. This is something humanity has done to our planet. We have a nuclear volcano spewing out radiation at unprecedented amounts right now that's being ignored. That's something our government could get involved with, but doesn't have direct responsibility. It's not in our country. St. Louis, on the other hand.
Yeah. After Fukushima, the German government, created a moratorium on their nuclear power.
That's right.
We did the opposite.
That's right.
And to get back to Westlake, Exelon Corporation, which is one of the responsible parties at the Westlake Superfund site, is actually originally it was Commonwealth Edison, which is the Chicago Electric Company. So Exelon is a major and has been a major contributor to the president for years. Illinois, his home state, has 10 nuclear power plants. I think 9 out of 10 are operated and owned by Exelon. So there's the current administration has a stake, in supporting nuclear power.
That's
and
true.
One of the people that benefits from that is, one of the business sector that benefits from that is the nuclear power industry, which includes Exelon. I think it's kind of a circular thing we're going on here. They both control. They create the waste, and then some of the same companies clean it up. One of Exelon's business partners in the nuclear power industry is Chicago Bridge and Iron. They're the food wrap contractor under the Corps of Engineers here in St. Louis that's doing the cleanup. So I don't know if you're following all this because it's kind of confusing, obviously, but if the Corps of Engineers gets the it changes over and Westlake comes under the Corps of Engineers, their contractor, Chicago Bridge and Iron, will be cleaning up a site in which one of the responsible parties is Exelon, their business partner in the nuclear power industry.
My God, really? So it's all just circular money anyways.
It's the power structure. The nuclear industry is been subsidized by the federal government since the very beginning, going back to the Manhattan Project.
We should build a pyramid on this CD. It would be kind of cool to see a visual on how that actually would really work. You know what I mean? You create a visual on that. It all it all is circular. The money goes straight in from the American people right into them, and all they do is siphon money out of us at every stop.
They're making both money on both ends. Okay, the same corporations.
Yeah.
Occasionally they'll change their name, so it becomes a little more confusing and harder to figure out who's who or connect the dots. But essentially that's what's been happening.
Well, this is the frustrating thing that I see from the outside is that it looks like the longer they ignore it, the more money they get to make. You know what I mean? So if they went in and dealt with it right away and handled it, then it wouldn't be such a big disaster. So then they wouldn't have these big, gigantic contracts like Bechtel up in Hanford, right? They were ordered in the mid-'90s to dig trenches, 40 miles of trenches, triple line them, let the nuclear waste, take them out of the tins that they're in, pour it in there and let it cool for 40 years so that it could actually cool down quicker. They decided to save money, dug the trenches, did not triple line them, did not pour it out. They just dumped the tins in, unlined trenches, so that now 25 years later the nuclear pollution is seeping into the groundwater of Seattle. And it's a huge catastrophe. They get their contract to fix that, and they're scrambling to do it is billions of dollars, not millions.
Right. In the case of the situation in St. Louis, they've been studying it for decades, and yet no action has been taken at Westlake Landfill.
Right.
1990. EPA took it over in 1990. There are all kinds. There's tens of thousands of pages of documents that you can go over, and there's all these different contractors that have benefited from doing these feasibility studies and such. And you could read that stuff for the rest of your life, probably. In the end, they're the ones that are pulling down the money. There's one particular engineer here that's been employed, at least part-time, by the responsible parties at Westlake for 22 years. And
doing what? What's he been doing?
He's doing soil sampling, doing feasibility studies. I don't know what he's doing exactly. He's being paid.
What's his name?
He's being paid well.
What's his name?
Paul Rosasco. He works for EMSI.
Huh. So he just keeps doing it. So what do you think? You've been reporting on this for over 20 years. So why do you think that, we have all these studies and all these scientists pretending that they're trying to do something, but what is your take as to why there's a lot of talk and no action?
I don't think they know what to do.
You think it's just that simple? They have no idea.
Well, they pretend to have this vast knowledge, and they always come across as being well informed. They use a lot of jargon.
Mm-hmm.
They that way when they speak to people, people don't think they understand it, and the experts do. But if you look at what the experts' actions are, there haven't been any. So in this case, at least.
Right.
So it's all wrapped up in, it has much more to do with politics than it has anything to do with science.
But
And
why isn't
go
that?
ahead.
Why don't they stop it then? If they really don't know what to do, why can't they stop it? Because it's just too much of a moneymaker?
I think you hit it there. You hit it on the head. It's that's a big part of it. It's once it's started, it has they have a vested interest in continuing this. And if the contracts, if they actually, did something to solve the problems, the contracts would dry up.
Yeah,
they don't want them to dry up.
This is the weird part. This is what I don't understand about that type of logic. I mean, I'm asking you because you've been reporting on it and been exposed to them for a long time. Not that you have all their answers.
I don't understand it either.
I mean, it doesn't make sense because those same dried up contracts, like if we stop doing the nuclear industry, like essentially at this point, what we need is to spend money in science on how to mitigate the harm that it's already caused. Forget every single nuclear power plant needs to be closed down tomorrow. If we stop tomorrow, we have several hundred years of scientific research that needs to be done to figure out how to save our planet. I mean,
the nuclear power industry has never, has always been subsidized by the federal government. They used to say that nuclear power was cheap and it was affordable and all that, but it really isn't.
Right.
And instead of putting the money into subsidizing nuclear power, they should be subsidizing alternative energy.
Right.
They started out to do that somewhat in the first Obama administration, but they tempered it with as much or more funding directed towards renewing nuclear power. I don't understand. They're trying to.
Well, what's really the
do
crime?
both.
This is what's really the insanity. It's not like we haven't had big warnings. In Obama's administration, we have had Fukushima happen, and we have had St. Louis being exposed. I mean, in my view, St. Louis is America's Fukushima. Like, people are living in St. Louis in radiation levels that we don't ask people of Fukushima to live in. That's the outrageous part of this. There's people we're outraged that the Japanese government is asking pregnant women to move back into Fukushima Prefecture, yet we say nothing about people having to live right next door to a nuclear dump site that have over 500 counts per minute inside their house. It's dumbfounding to me, CD. I don't comprehend the people of St. Louis. Like, they have just been conditioned to accept it, like that's just their plight, and that's too bad. That's just what they have to do. They have to keep their trap shut.
Well, I think to their credit, there's been a lot of people that have spoken out against this, and that they're trying to do what they can to. Through their elected representatives, which has been hard for them to get their attention.
Yeah.
But it took years of work by the St. Louis Moms Organization, Coldwater Creek, and just the facts, both of which I should say that people, your listeners should go to their Facebook pages. As well as our documentary film page has a lot of documents, firstsecretcity.com. And the first step towards any of this is what we're doing right now, is to expose it and to talk about it and to bring it to light.
That's right. That's exactly why every Monday, as soon as I heard about this, I realized, you know what, like, at least I have this venue. I can interview activists. I've had Don Chapman on. Kim has been on. I mean, the women and the people of St. Louis really are our heroes, our American heroes, because they are the front line of defense against the liars. I mean, that's how I feel. Like, they're having to live with it. It's literally right in their backyard, literally. And they are suffering the physical consequences of it also.
And I have to credit the women for stepping up and actually being the lead in this effort.
Yes.
From Kay Dry to Don Chapman.
Kim Visitone. There's a handful of them that are just like relentless and have organized in such a magnificent way to make this a real serious, to bring this the seriousness that it deserves. And the relentlessness that they've done has just been awesome.
Yeah, the documentation that they have, that Angela Helbling has done the research on and provided to the community has been an invaluable service, as well as the health survey that the Coldwater Creek people have done. They've just if they hadn't done this, well, we wouldn't be talking about today, and our film wouldn't have been made, okay, as it was. So, I'd like to mention that Larry Bergen, who's a disabled steel worker that worked at the plant in Venice, Illinois, and was overexposed in the workplace, is how I got reconnected to this issue back in 2009. And I hope that at some point you might consider having him on the program. He's very well spoken and knowledgeable.
I'd love to have him. Maybe you can give me his number and I can be in touch with him. I would love that. Sure. I think that more people, this is why I decided to dedicate this every Monday to this, because this is something that can't become yesterday's news. It is today's news. And until we really have an honest, I kind of believe that St. Louis is going to be the catalyst for us for changing and admitting that nuclear is harmful and really becoming truthful about it, because I love the title of your film, The First Secret City. I've watched the trailer. I'm very much looking forward to being able to have it shown here in Eugene. It is a very important venue for us to all admit and, embrace this concept that we are St. Louis.
Well, we appreciate your recognition of of the seriousness of the problem here, and we're doing. I made the film. Took 5 years to do it, and for that very reason, is to get the word out that this is happening, that there is a serious problem in this community, and that we're not alone in this, as you pointed out. Other communities throughout the United States are suffering from the wrongdoing by the federal government in regard to both nuclear power and the nuclear weapons program.
Well, it has to do with the secrecy. The secrecy is really the downside to all of this. This is what we have to end. And the collusion. I mean, a lot of these scientists are colluded. They're being, the option is if they speak out, they lose their big, high-paying jobs. They can't get a job anywhere else. And so that kind of bullying of our scientific community must end, because we deserve a future. And we cannot have a future without
basically, the scientists are part of the industry. So they, when you say scientists, you always think of them being objective. It's not objective. Their viewpoints are shaded and by the fact that they need government and corporate backing in order to do their work. Right. And so most of them, unlike John Goffman, who's a hero of mine, they don't they compromise themselves.
Amen to that.
And that's a big problem. That's been a problem with this issue from the very beginning, as far as how science and medicine has colluded with the military industrial complex.
Well, CD, look, we have about 20 seconds left. This hour has gone really fast. Please check out the firstsecretcity.com. It's their website about their documentary. Thank you, CD Stelzer, for joining us. I hope you can come back again soon.
I thank you for having me.
Well, please put your courage feet on, you guys. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.